Welcome to the Doctors of Medicine channel. I'm Harmony, your personal physiologist. Okay, so today I'm going to give you a brief overview of the embryology and anatomy of the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Okay, so fourth week of embryological development marks the initial stage where the nervous system begins to grow. Okay, so it is the first system to develop, although not the first to be functional. All right, so we begin with the neural tube. There is a neural tube, central canal. Central canal will consist of your cerebral spinal fluid. So we have the cephalic end of the neural tube, which will give rise to the brain. The caudal end gives rise to the spinal cord. Further above, we follow the differentiation pathway. The brain portion pops up and forms three distinct areas. We have your prosencephalon, mesencephalon, or the rhombencephalon. In layman terms, we call it the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. Okay, so the caudal end still forms the spinal cord. The word encephalon simply means the brain. Right, so let's follow it here. The prosencephalon will pop up and form your telencephalon, diencephalon. Mesencephalon will still remain the same. Then your rhombencephalon will differentiate into two components, your metencephalon and lastly the diencephalon. The major focus for today is your diencephalon. So let's bring it this side and see what happens with the diencephalon. Alright, so here is your diencephalon. Diencephalon. So the diencephalon gives rise to four major structures. First one is the thalamus. Second one, you have what we call the pineal gland, also known as the epiphysis, majorly releasing your melatonin. Right, so the two other structures that we get from your diencephalon are the hypothalamus. Here is the hypothalamus, and inferiorly, we have what we call the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, right? So the pituitary gland, we also call it the hypophysis. Hypophysis consists of two lobes. Your anterior lobe, and your posterior lobe. Alright, so this is what we have. Anterior lobe, posterior lobe, we call this the pituitary gland. Superiorly, you have the hypothalamus. Pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus by means of a pituitary stalk. Pituitary stalk, right? Pituitary stalk. We also call the pituitary stalk the infundibulum, alright? Infundibulum. What a sweet word. So, here's what we have. Let's start with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is considered an amalgamation of different nuclei, okay? So there's nuclei, they come together and form the hypothalamus. But of importance, we'll only mention two major nuclei, alright? So, this is what we have. The first one is known as the supraoptic nucleus. The other one, we call it the paraventricular nucleus. And the other one that is usually mentioned, we call it the arcuate nucleus, okay? The arcuate nucleus. Another region that we have in the hypothalamus. At the base of the hypothalamus, we find the point where the two optic nerves cross each other to appear on the opposite sides of your cerebral cortex as they head towards the occipital region of your brain. So we call this the optic chiasm, right? So the optic chiasm. So, compression of the optic chiasm due to any kind of tumors in the brain region near it will result in loss of bilateral vision. Remember that. So, the paraventricular nuclei and the supraventricular nucleus as well, they will send their axons all the way to your posterior lobe of the adeno, of your hypophysis, So, these axon terminals are going to serve as stimulators of your posterior lobe, right? So there we have, or paraventricular nucleus. So you have your axon terminals here, posterior lobe, anterior lobe. Where do these two come from? So a bit of embryology of the pituitary gland. Remember your three germ layers, okay? Three germ layers, embryological development. We have ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Let's focus only on your endoderm, alright? So the endoderm is divided into two. You have surface, sorry, I'm supposed to say ectoderm. Ooh. So you have ectoderm, you have surface, ectoderm, then we have your neuroectoderm. So the surface ectoderm is going to give rise to your adenohypophysis. So embryologically, we have a pouch formed from your surface ectoderm that is in connection with your primitive pharynx. So this pouch is in connection with our primitive pharynx, or you can say the primitive mouth. We call this the pouch of Rathke. Pouch of Rathke. Pouch of Rathke. So with time, the pouch of Rathke disconnects from your primitive pharynx and descends to form your pituitary gland. In cases where it doesn't descend, you get something called a pharyngeal pituitary gland. The pituitary gland will remain connected to your mouth. That would be bad, man. Okay, so the neuroectoderm, look at this. Neuroectoderm, it's neural, obviously, forms your neural structures. It's going to give rise to your neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis. So, neurohypophysis is the other name for your posterior lobe of the hypothalamus, of the pituitary gland, sorry, posterior lobe. Alright, so this is it on the lobes. Alright, so a bit of numbers. 80% of the pituitary gland consists of your adenohypophysis. This one only makes 20%, right? So, the adenohypophysis, the one coming from your pouch of Rathke, this is your anterior lobe. It is going to secrete and synthesize. So it synthesizes and secretes hormones. Whereas the neurohypophysis only secretes. So it serves as a temporary store for hormones produced by the nuclei in the hypothalamus, okay? So the supraoptic nuclei, the paraventricular nuclei. As we shall look at it in the next segment, where we say the supraoptic nuclei mainly produces a hormone that we call vasopressin. Your paraventricular nuclei mainly produces oxytocin, right? So that is it. Let's look a bit at some surface anatomy just to conclude this segment for today. The location of your gland, hypothalamus and pituitary gland, location. So, it's located at the base of the brain, base of the skull, if you like, base of skull. So, the bone that we find at the base of the skull, we call it the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone has a pouch-like structure that we call your sella tessica, alright? So the sella tessica, then the pituitary gland with all its glory and might will sit inside the sella tessica, alright? So we call this the sella tessica. Sella tessica meaning Turkish saddle. Alright, so there we go. Sella tessica, base of brain, sphenoid bone provides the sella tessica where your pituitary gland will sit. So any kind of tumors occurring to the pituitary gland means that it has no room to expand going down. It's only going to expand going up and pushes on the brain, okay? This is a very dangerous thing. That is all on the location of the pituitary gland. So look at this. The hypothalamus. The posterior pituitary gland is an extension of your diencephalon. Some people, they consider it an extension of the brain. So you have these axons which permeate down, descend vertically and terminate in the posterior lobe. So that's why you call it the neurohypophysis. It's only neural. It's a temporary storage for the hormones produced by this guy. But for the adenohypophysis, we call it adeno because it's a gland, okay? Adenohypophysis. So adeno for gland. Hypophysis for pituitary gland. It's going to synthesize and secrete what are called stimulating hormones. So it secretes what are called stimulating hormones. So secretion of these stimulating hormones is mediated by hormones produced by the hypothalamus that we call releasing hormones, right? So the hypothalamus secretes releasing hormones which will then activate the secretion of the stimulating hormones. We'll mention these ones in the next segment, and they're referred to as your hypophysiotropic hormones. Alright, so I think this marks the end of this segment. Until next time, keep looking up and cheers.